I'm here with Guy Rolnik, who is teaching at the University of Chicago Booth School, but he is known and extremely well known in Israel, where he founded a financial and economic newspaper that is doing great media work. And right now, he is also interested, and he's here for discussing the topic of the information ecosystem, media, and social media issues that come up, misinformation, etc. He's going to be part of a panel here tomorrow that's called Media and the Information Ecosystem. Welcome, Guy.
Great being here.
And we are just leaving a session with Renee DiResta, who wrote a book called Invisible Rulers. And it's all about the dynamics and curation of speech online and whether we know what is true online and the extent to which various curation mechanisms affect democracy and lots of other issues that come up in this case. One of the things I wanted you to talk about and describe is the experience you had with AI content impersonating you on YouTube. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, the specific incident is not that important. Okay, it just serves as a way to understand the business model of companies like Meta and the rest of the social media companies is incompatible with democracy. So it was April of 2025, and I started getting from former students of mine and acquaintances and readers and just people that I know that they see ads on Facebook and on Instagram that I have opened this new group where I invite people to join me and I will give them stock tips. Okay. So I don't know the exact numbers, but I guess 80% of the people understood that this is a scam. 10% of the people says that's interesting, looks weird, and 10% of the people said that's it. Guy, decided that teaching at the university and being a journalist is not enough. He's now into selling stocks and tips on the internet. Well, that was part of a big operation of some fraudster all over the world that were impersonating to well-known like celebrity economic business figures, famous journalists, famous economic professors, and they thought that my brand identity is good enough to
To
start
attract some
to
people.
attract some people. At first, I thought it's funny because it is. And then because I assumed that people will know that this is a scam, okay? And I thought this will go away very fast because you see all kind of crazy stuff online. Then, in the next, I don't know, 24 to 48 hours, hundreds of people are reaching out to me with all kind of questions. Some people, this is a scam, and some people, what's happening to you? Why are you doing that? And some people are saying, I want to join your.
Yeah.
So I understood, okay, this is a big problem. So I reached out to the law firm of Meta and complained. And then I started to go through this really ordeal, horrible process with those people that basically they are putting so many hurdles in your way, just how you complain and what they ask you. So they automatically shift the burden of the incident to you.
Right.
Now, we have to understand here is a company that is enabling fraudster, deceiving its own users, its own clients, and of course harming me in what turned out later to be significant way. And the minute that you provide them with information about that, the first reaction is
Right.
shift the blame and the work to you, the individual. Now, the harm,
The victim.
the victim. no, the real victims in many ways are all
The
hundreds of thousands of users.
right.
Okay, I'm also a victim. Anyway, so they shift automatically the burden and the blame to the victim. And then they tell you what you should do. How do you report? And when do you report? They log you off from Instagram and Facebook, and then he asks you, and you don't know whether it's worked or not. You have to still wait for other people to do it. Well, they didn't take it down. And then I reach out to them again and again. And then there is a lot of grotesques and Kafkaesque things happening because at some point they tell you something, yeah, you don't expect us, this is all in writing, you don't expect us to be able to monitor everything that is happening on our platforms. This is Meta telling me you don't expect us to make sure that we are not deceiving our users. And this is in text, okay? And then they tell you at some point where I kept getting more and more, and I reached out to them, and they stopped answering. The answer was, "We don't work over the weekend." Now, people, we need to give some context. Okay, we are talking about the company of evaluation of something like anywhere between 1.5 to $2 trillion. It's the fourth or the fifth largest company in the world. It's one of the most
Profitable.
profitable companies in the history of corporations. We're talking about a company that makes anywhere between 50 to $100 billion free cash flow every year. We're talking about a company that invests tens of billions of dollars every year in AI. So the most powerful company, one of the most powerful companies in the world, actually telling you, we can't get rid of those people that are impersonating to you on and harming you and harming our users. So this has been going on for weeks, and I'm not able now. The thing of talk about the legal environment that protects Meta. The lawyers that send me these letters, like negotiating with me, answering me, they have at the very end of the letter, they remind you, they have like that, uh, we are actually not representing Meta. And the reason they are writing it, and yet they are communicating with me, is that they want to tell me that I cannot sue them. So the real liars, if I'll sue them, are of course in California. And the reason they want to make sure that it's in California, because they want to make sure that here in
Is
California it's
immunity.
protected. There is immunity under what we call the Section 230 of the 1996
Communication.
Telecommunication Act. So here we have a company that has a business model actually that gives them incentives to defraud their users. And this is a case where the defrauding and the scamming is directly at their own users. And as me, as someone, by the way, I don't use Facebook for years. It's been now in the last 10 years, I probably posted on Facebook 5 times or something like that. So this is before we talk about all the negative externalities of society. So from this short story, understand how incompatible Meta is with anything with any democratic or any
How is this about democracy in the sense that the law
in the
does
sense
not
that
give
those people,
you
no, it gives you
protection?
no, in the sense that the same culture, the same incentives are in the way the algorithm works. Okay, that this company, because it's a monopoly, because it has legal protection, because you cannot sue them, because they are totally opaque, because there is zero accountability on all fronts, because there is no corporate governance, because there is no regulation, and more and more and more. Any harm that they do to our discourse, to the trust of people in institution, no, we cannot do anything.
Right. So we're powerless. So you're
Yeah.
just saying that society has ceded control over important
Over the most
functions.
important.
Yeah. The discourse.
Yeah, over the most important. We need to understand that we are in point in time that we are probably in the worst epistemic crisis that we had for hundreds of years. Okay. And when I say epistemic crisis, it sounds very abstract. What is epistemic crisis? So we need to understand epistemic crisis is basically when there is a total breakdown in the trust and the legitimacy of our knowledge institutions. Okay, But what people today take for granted knowledge institutions, and they forget that the ascent of knowledge institutions in the last 100 years, 200 years, is what enabled everything that we have here today, okay? Science, university, state capacity, journalism. This is the ascent of those institutions and the efficacy of those institutions, the trust in those institutions is what enabled everything that today we take for standard. It's liberal democracy, it's protection of the state, it's courts, it's holding powerful to account, it's everything. So this entire infrastructure of our democracy, and especially the kind of democracy that we have since World War II, underneath it there is information infrastructure.
Right.
And
Knowledge of
and
some
we have
sort.
5 companies that are destroying this information infrastructure. And this is
Gets
where we are
corrupted.
today.
Yeah.
It gets corrupted and it gets manipulated. And more so, it is controlled by
Few
5
individual.
new individuals that have totally different interests. Okay. They are now becoming very close to government. Government all over the world. Government is getting very close to them. I think this is the number one issue that anyone that is in academia, in politics, everywhere should be concerned
I
with.
mean, we had here as a guest of Corporation Society Initiative, and I didn't introduce myself. I'm Anat Admati, the director of that initiative that's sponsoring also these Power to Truth that we're recording. We had Nicole Perlroth, who talks about cybersecurity, and we had an event with her very recently where she expressed significant concern about what AI will do to cybersecurity, particularly infrastructure. And sure enough, we just learned that Anthropic decided not to release certain um, technology because it was going to really. They were seeing that it found a lot of vulnerabilities
Yeah.
in a lot of infrastructure, and so they
But
gave
even
it.
if in this example that you gave, Anna, there is something weird because
Anthropic is
do
deciding.
do we want Anthropic people, to decide what is
Well, that's
dangerous to society and what is not
that's what's
dangerous
happening.
to
But the
society?
point,
The other
what I
just
wanted
yes,
to say,
yeah.
what I wanted to tell you is that Nicole Perlroth, who has sounded the alarm, she has a book called "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends," which is from 2021, was saying, to your point, towards the end of her session, she said that there are 3 things that are most concerning for society. From the third to the first, cybersecurity was number 3, climate change number 2, and disinformation number 1. In other words, the problem you're talking about. In
Yeah.
other words, that problem of not knowing what's true or not, of not sharing basic facts and knowledge, and being unable to trust anything,
Yeah.
is the biggest
Yeah,
problem.
it's, we use, when we discuss the harms of big tech and social media, and now, of course, LLMs, we automatically talk about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. We need to understand that the problems with those machines go much farther than just misinformation, disinformation. Social media doesn't just distort what we know, it rewires the way we think. And since everyone is using social media and now LLMs for the past 10 or 20 years, we have to understand that those 5 companies, with the way they designed our algorithm, has rewired all our brains and rewired all our society. Okay, now there are many, many ways. We won't go into a lot of details. There is tons of body of literature on that, that actually you can and you cause a lot of harm with real information.
Right.
You don't need misinformation. You don't need disinformation. Information can become harmful just because it's optimized for emotion, just because it has no friction, as it's instantaneously, and we see it everywhere. So the real problem is much deeper than misinformation. It's a system that trains us to prefer moral outrage over truth. And as I said, the algorithm do not optimize for truth, but they optimize for engagement and outrage. And we have become a society that is full of rage.
Yeah, the
And we
anger
see it
is
everywhere. The
age of
anger
rage.
is
There's
everywhere.
a book
And
by
we
that
are,
title.
so people my age and your age are used to the idea that there is, first of all, truth, and more importantly, there are methods for inquiry of truth.
Yeah,
There are methods
and
in
basing policy on
yeah,
truth,
and
and
basing a life on the truth, on knowledge institution. It's debatable. Truth changes over time as science develops, and there is a discourse. We know how to debate it in a transparent way. We have now a generation, actually, generation that was, grew up on those machines that do not understand there is something called truth. They don't trust anything.
well, I mean, not
We are creating
trusting.
an electorate that think the truth is just a narrative.
Right.
There is no such thing as truth. And they say, okay, there is
And
no
that,
such,
by the way, is
yeah,
the dream of
of
dictators.
dictators and
That
proto-dictator.
Hannah
Yeah,
Arendt, totalitarianism
yeah,
says, the key is that people don't believe anything.
yeah.
That that is where people who just want to control thrive, because then there's just no nothing on the other side.
Yeah, so just yesterday, I think it was in the New York Times, and there is a new research that actually shows that Google AI search results systematically have hallucinations and just outright inaccurate information. So the data is, I have it here, that 1 out of 10
Yeah,
answers
10%.
are 10% of what you get. Now we have to understand that most users, when they go on Google and search for something, and this is the first thing that comes up,
Yeah,
they don't doubt it.
they don't doubt.
Okay, they don't doubt it. And here we have a company, $4 trillion company, Google, saying, we will give 10% of our answers are going to be a hallucination or just making stuff up or stuff that is based on Facebook posts. So we have the largest companies in the world knowingly undermining everything undermining knowledge. What is knowledge? And the thing about AI answers, especially when you get it from chatbots and from Google search, is that it's fast, and people conflate fast with authoritative.
Mm-hmm.
People think that this is the truth. Now, the problem is not only that they are not making enough efforts to make sure that there is no hallucination, lies, and just made up stuff from social media. The problem is that we are since there are only a handful of companies. At some point, if those companies, when they make decisions tomorrow, where are we going to train our models? Are we going to train it with New York Times, or we're going to train it with some fringe, crazy website that says that the science does not exist, or someone? So the decisions of people there, a few people, handful of people, totally opaque, that where we're going to train, on which data are we going to train our models, will decide what kind of information billions of people will get. Okay. Now, the idea that we can have 4 companies, all right, or 5 companies that control social media, instant messaging, and LLMs, and regulator, and we will have a democracy, it's absurd. This is incompatible. There is a famous quote by Justice Louis Brandeis, 120 years back, that says, we can have democracy and we can have uh, great wealth, a concentration of wealth. We will not have both. The same thing can be said about the state of the affairs today, about democracy. We can have unregulated, concentrated, big tech companies, or we can have democracy. We will not have both.
Mm-hmm. Well, a very grim note, but just speak for a couple of minutes before we end about ideas that might help.
Yeah. So first of all, and this has to do with some of the discussions that we had here in the conference and in other settings here
Mm-hmm.
in Stanford in the last 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one thing that we should be very wary about and cognizant is that there is a lot of interest by many people that when we talk about the problems talked by technology, to think that technology is also the answer. We have those horrible negative externalities to societies caused by technology. Let's bring more technology. We need more AI. We need more tools. We need more smart things. No. If we look at the history and of technology and the history of democracy, we know that you solve those problems not with more technology. You solve those problems with laws and regulation and rules. And we have so much, if you look at the entire discourse around what we just discussed in the last 30 minutes, much of the discourse is always goes to some more and more granular discussion about technology and that version. To give an example, one of the judges in the Google case, government brought a suit to break up Google because of the monopoly and the harms of Google. So his first ruling, he says, yes, Google obtains its monopoly by illegal conduct. Okay, that was in 2024. And then in 2025, he says that, but I'm not going to introduce any meaningful remedies. Why? Because technology is changing. Now we have AI. Okay, so there is this belief that we are going to solve. Yes, we do have a lot of problems. We see democracy all over the world in decline, but soon we're going to have more technology and technology will save it because now AI will come. And no, the only way to solve those problems, if you look at the history of the last 500 years, of the last 100 years, we solve these problems with laws and regulation. Think about it. We have anywhere between 4 to 5 billion people on those platforms today. Those platforms collect infinite amount of information about anything that we do. They know everything, okay? They know what you searched for, what you stopped for, what you shared, what you looked, everything. So they have built, and they're building vast amount of psychological and political profile on every user in the world, on every person that has a smartphone. So we have lost our sovereignty. We have lost our self-governance. Why? Because any of those tech companies know exactly our particular taste in politics and whether we are swing votes and what matters to us and how we can be manipulated. They have all this information. We don't have this information. Okay, we don't want the government to have this kind of information.
What should we do?
Okay, so I think we should think about rules in a few buckets. The first one is the simplest one, liability. Okay, someone with so much power should not be totally exempted from. This is Section 230.
To whom exactly? To individuals or
to the companies, of course.
No, I know, but who would be? What would they be liable for, and in what form?
For any harm that happens on their platform. If I am a
But you have to be able to show that you were harmed.
Yes, every you can sue any company for the harm they do. Which companies are exempted for harm?
The internet.
The biggest top companies. Number one, we have to do with the liability. Number two, we have to deal with the amount of information that they can collect on us. The surveillance, what they collect, how they use it to target us, how long and how deep is the information that they collect of us. Number three that it want to discuss is in banking, as we know, the first set of regulation is know your customer.
Yeah.
You cannot walk into a bank tomorrow with a sack of $5 million and tell them, please deposit it and then send it to this place in the Middle East or that place. Of course not. Everyone, we need to have know your customer on every tech platform. We cannot give special rights to bots. Okay, so that's the second back. The fourth one is, those companies operate globally, and they have immense influence on all countries around the world. All citizens in all countries around the world should be able to sue and to hold to account those companies locally under their laws.
So they have to incorporate in every.
Yeah, they have to incorporate, and goes back to your research. They have to have local executives and directors that you can sue. You can hold them to account locally. You cannot tell them, go to California, sue me in California. And actually, I don't work here.
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm here, I'm running everything, but I'm not a director and I don't work here. It's Dublin, it's California, it's Russia. Okay. So they need to be accountable. And the last thing, of course, that we have to do, and a lot of countries around the world are already leading this effort. The U.S. is behind. Is make sure that our kids are not there.
Oh, the
Okay,
kids,
we
yeah.
don't allow kids, until the age of 18 or 21 to do a lot of things. The only thing that we allow them is to have Meta and TikTok and X manipulate our kids, okay, in such a young age. And we know that internal data in those companies show the huge harm there is to children. And I think that in the future, when we look back at this period of time of 10 or 20 years and said we let our kids on those platforms, people say, what were we thinking? This is crazy. And how come that we had to fight tooth and nail with the management of those companies to stop that? How come that, we knew that they want to addict us, okay? And we don't do anything. Think about those companies. It has to do again with the internal culture of this company, how corrupt it is. They know exactly what they're doing to children and they don't care because this is part of their
Yeah.
important part of the business model.
Well, I think more people are becoming aware of these issues, and there are some lawsuits and using product liability and
Yeah.
other kind of methods as opposed to going after specific speech. And so there's many issues. And we're going to discuss more of this in a panel that will, I believe, be posted as well with René DiResta and with Alexandra Geis, who is from the European Parliament and very active on these issues. And I think you and her see eye to eye pretty much on a number of these kinds
Yeah.
of issues. Thank you very much, Guy.
Thank you for having me.